Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast. I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. It's the Friday show. And it's not just any Friday. It's also Flag Day. Martha Ann Alito's favorite day of the year. Yeah, she's known to get blackout drunk and streak nude down the Jersey Shore. Her love for flags just can't be contained. Still no ceasefire agreement in Gaza as the Israeli military pushes deeper into Rafah and intensifies its bombing campaign. Al Jazeera published a new analysis on the extent of damage in Gaza after more than 8 months of sustained Israeli airstrikes. The red on the maps marks buildings that have been destroyed over time, and it shows that 3/4 of all structures in the northern Gaza Strip have been leveled, as have a significant portion of buildings in the south. Israel is running out of buildings to bomb, which explains why the military is now targeting tents full of refugees. Dwindling targets and ceasefire negotiations haven't slowed Israel's war-making, though, and neither will a deep sense of shame. Because this week, the United Nations, for the first time, added Israel to its list of countries committing grave violations against children. Children. The UN's so-called list of shame. The international body noted that around the world, there was a 21% increase in crimes against children, with nearly 33,000 grave violations documented, encompassing conflicts in Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, South Sudan, and Ukraine. But it's Israel's genocide in Gaza which is really pumping up the numbers. From the UN, quote, Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory presents an unprecedented scale and intensity of grave violations against children, with hostilities leading to an increase in grave violations of 155%. That's where the highest number of violations were documented. The report goes on, quote, the Israeli armed and security forces have been listed for the killing and maiming of children and for attacks on schools and hospitals. The last quarter of 2023 exposed an extreme rise in violations, particularly against children in the Gaza Strip, in particular the use of explosive weapons with wide area effects, including in highly populated areas, which resulted in a large number of child casualties and increased attacks on schools and hospitals. Human rights groups applauded Israel's inclusion on this shit list. Human Rights Watch called it long overdue, but fully justified. Thousands of unionized flight attendants rallied at more than 30 airports around the world, demanding a fair new labor contract. Dubbed the Worldwide Flight Attendant Day of Action, the airline workers are seeking higher wages and safer working conditions. In particular, they want to be compensated for hours of labor they do while planes are still grounded. Currently, flight attendants don't get paid while the plane door is still open. Roughly 100,000 flight attendants working across several airlines are locked in contract negotiations that in some cases have dragged on for 5 years. And unlike in other industries where unions can call strikes to gain leverage in those negotiations, airline workers, just like rail workers, have to first get permission from a national mediation board before going on a picket. That's based on rules imposed under the Railway Labor Act. It's the reason why President Biden and Democrats were able to block a rail strike a year and a half ago. Only after the mediation board deems that negotiations have been exhausted does it allow for a strike. Dozens of senators, led by Bernie Sanders, wrote a letter to the board saying now is the time to release the unions from forced mediation and empower them to strike. The missive read, quote, "It seems airline carriers do not feel pressured to reach agreements quickly, likely because the flight attendants' ability to strike has rarely been allowed to be exercised. We are concerned that this fact has contributed to the present pattern of unending negotiations and that many carriers are taking advantage of the situation. Therefore, we join with our 178 colleagues in the House to urge the board to use all of the tools at your disposal, including releasing parties from mediation as necessary, to resolve these long pending contract negotiations." The letter was applauded by flight attendants unions. Sarah Nelson, who heads the Association of Flight Attendants under the CWA, which represents 55,000 flight attendants, said, quote, "Airline executives have believed they have a free pass to delay conclusion of negotiations while richly rewarding themselves. No more. Flight attendants and other aviation workers are ready to back up demands for long overdue record contracts. The strike is not the goal, but it is the means in these situations to get real on getting a deal." Amid the COVID pandemic, airliners got bailed out with more than $50 billion. And since then, flying sucks more than ever. And so does working on planes. But it is something that I do believe a labor strike can fix. While attending the G7 summit in Europe, President Biden forged even closer military ties with Ukraine, signing on to a 10-year security agreement. The pact will ensure the flow of weapons and defense assistance to the Ukrainian military for the next decade, assuming that a future president doesn't void it, since it's not a treaty or anything that'll be ratified by Congress. The Washington Post described the deal as, quote, "a framework for a long-term effort by the United States to help develop Ukraine's armed forces, which have innovated on drone warfare and other cutting-edge techniques in the fight against Russia, but are also desperately outgunned and in need of modern weapons." Ukraine has actually signed similar security agreements with other Western nations. And if you're wondering what's in it for these other Western nations that are committing so many resources to Ukraine, well, it's not just ensuring an adversary like Russia is bogged down in a ground war. It's also about ensuring access to new markets for Western capitalists. And right on cue, the Ukrainian government is conducting a fire sale on its public assets. The New York Times reported that 20 state-owned companies are up for sale, from an historic hotel to distilleries to a critical mining company. The plan is to sell at least $100 million worth of assets this year, and at dirt cheap prices too. This is from the Times. Quote, "Ukrainian officials and experts acknowledge that given the risks posed by the conflict, assets are likely to be sold at lower prices than they would have been before the war." Currently, the Ukrainian public owns about 3,100 companies. In the end, according to the Times, the government wants to get that number down to 100. During an auction scheduled for this fall, the government will put up for sale its United Mining and Chemical Company, one of the largest producers of titanium in the world. However, there is one thing that might deter even disaster capitalists from scooping up Ukrainian properties at low prices, and that's Russian bombs, which are sadly still falling on the country. And the paper pointed to a public power plant that the government hoped to sell until it was destroyed by a barrage of Russian missiles back in April. The Ukrainian army prevented Russian invaders from seizing Kyiv, only to leave the gates open to vulture capitalists. All right, Fridays are for rich dicks, or as my phone autocorrects to, rich ducks, of which there is only one, Scrooge McDuck. It's canon. All right, but for real, let's check out those nominations on social media. Arona nominated all the landlords. Strong nomination every week, but especially on news that corporate landlord profits are surging thanks to high rents and fees. A report from accountable.us found that the 6 largest corporate landlord companies made $300 million combined in increased profits in just the first quarter of 2024. A lot of that can be tied to a mass price-fixing cartel that the Department of Justice is only just now making moves to dismantle. New York Governor Kathy Hochul was also nominated. Still fallout from her decision to delay congestion pricing in lower Manhattan. John Kirby is nominated for his usual efforts this week running cover for a genocide. Daytona Slim, in fact, wrote a poem for him titled, "John Kirby is Full of Shit." Nice work. And we have a nomination here for Canada's Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who's done a piss-poor job of protecting the endangered spotted owl up north. Come on, Stephen. Strong nominations this week, like every week, but one oligarch distinguished himself above all others. All right, here we go. This week's rich dick is... Yep, it's Elon Musk again. It's been a while, you bastard, but then again, you never really left, did you? Thanks to The Wolf and to Workers Built It for nominating Elon. So this week, Musk got his compliant shareholders at Tesla to approve of an absolutely ludicrous compensation package that he in no way deserves. Comes out to about $50 billion in stock options, despite the company's share value plummeting by more than 25% this year on lagging sales, malfunctioning cars, and Musk's own erratic behavior. This compensation package was already struck down by a judge in Delaware who ruled that it wasn't a fair price and that the board neglected its fiduciary responsibilities by approving it. Musk is currently appealing that ruling, and this favorable vote from shareholders could bolster his case. If it doesn't, and Musk loses again, then he threatened to reincorporate Tesla in Texas, where courts are more favorable to business interests. Musk used threats to get the pay package, too. 44% of shareholders in Tesla are retail investors. In other words, not billionaires and big banks or anything, which would be kind of cool in any other company, but here we're talking about Tesla fanatics, Musk heads, people who'd get one of Elon's brain chips drilled into their skull without thinking twice. And still, Musk threatened them to get their approval for his bonus, claiming he'd leave the company to build cars elsewhere if he didn't get it. So it was basically a shakedown at Tesla. Since buying Twitter and investing deeper into AI technology, Musk has deprioritized Tesla, including diverting resources from the car company to his other holdings. It was reported last month Musk diverted $500 million worth of NVIDIA computer chips that were supposed to go to Tesla. He redirected them to Twitter, or what he calls X now, instead. From NBC, quote, "By ordering NVIDIA to let privately held X jump the line of Tesla, Musk pushed back the automaker's receipt of more than $500 million in graphics processing units, or GPUs, by months, likely adding to delays in setting up the supercomputers Tesla says it needs to develop autonomous vehicles and humanoid robots." Musk is actually being sued over this by, let's say, the more discerning Tesla shareholders over what they call brazen disloyalty to the company, citing the diverted computer chips and also employees that Musk has moved out of Tesla to his other companies. Yeah, it's almost like he's just using the company for his own purposes, which for now aligns with the AI industry, not so much cars, which again, don't work too well and are subject to numerous state and federal investigations anyway. But Tesla employees should consider themselves lucky that the company is being used to drive resources to Elon's hobbies, rather than to populate the planet with more Elons. The Wall Street Journal published a story about Elon's creeping on subordinates at SpaceX. The paper reported that Musk had sexual relationships with 2 employees, one of them an intern, who he later promoted to an executive. Musk is also alleged to have asked a third woman several times to bear his children. And when she refused, she was denied a raise. Back in 2022, it was reported that Musk propositioned a SpaceX flight attendant and exposed himself to her. The company paid her $250,000 as a severance package afterward. And before anyone says, what's the big deal? These are all consenting adults. No, he's the owner of the company, and he's luring his subordinates to sleep with him because he has more power over them. And it's not just predatory, it's pretty pathetic. And this is the guy whose executive leadership is supposedly worth $50 billion. No, thank you. And I haven't even mentioned how Musk this week endorsed the German far right. He mused on Twitter about the political party AfD, or the Alternative for Germany. Quote, "Why is there such a negative reaction from some about AfD? They keep saying far right, but the policies of AfD that I've read about don't sound extremist. Maybe I'm missing something?" Yeah, you're missing the fact that the party hates immigrants, hates Muslims, hates LGBTQ people, wants to crush the working class, cavorts with white supremacist organizations, wants to ban circumcision and kosher meat imports, but at the same time is a staunch ally of Israel, which makes sense given that both are ideologically aligned fascist and committed to making Jews feel less safe around the world. I mean, it's the German far right. They're literally Nazis, Elon. You're not missing anything. You're just in lock goose step with them. And so, for shaking down your company for $50 billion, for using your other company as your own private dating pool, and for promoting German neo-Nazis, and for like a dozen other garbage things you did over the last few days, Elon Musk, you're this week's rich dick. Okay, gang, the show ends this morning with a sunrise from Maine. It was sent in by Joe and Alyssa from Old Orchard Bay. Enjoy. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Alyssa. Show's over. Thank you for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we'll be right here. The team does have the next week off, though. A little early summer break. We'll be back the week after that. See you then.